Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
To be joined once again by my friend and co-host, Zen Garcia. Are you there, sir?
I am, brother. Good to be here with you again and with everybody listening.
Yeah, man. Tonight, the Take on the World 2020 conference kicked off earlier this. It started like 7:30 or 7 o'clock or something like that Central Time. And so that's off and running. So if anybody wants to check that out, you guys can go to Robbie Davidson's YouTube channel, Celebrate Truth. And it's streaming for free. So be sure to check that out. And Take on the World TV also has some stuff on their channel, I think. And you can maybe look it up on the website to find the speaker schedule. Do you know when you're scheduled to go on?
No, I have no clue. I think they're just releasing it day by day.
Yeah, they're doing it day by day for the next 3 more days, but they had a schedule up that showed
for the whole thing.
Yeah, it showed who
okay.
went. I think I'm closing out 3 of the 4 nights anyway. So
nice.
Mine's at the end.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Well, people can check that out. I enjoyed. Tonight they had mine, and then there was another guy, and I just had his name and forgot it already. Kevin's in the chat room. Maybe you can help me out, buddy. I can't remember the other speaker. He was actually supposed to go before me, but something happened, I think, with his upload or whatever. So they put mine on first, and then his followed afterwards.
Right.
But it was pretty good. And then they got a really. I think they start maybe around noon. I think tomorrow or something like that. So and then it's like all day for the next couple of days. So.
Yeah, a lot of presentations. I do plan on trying to catch some of it. And, at some point I'll try to go back and review as much as I can.
Yeah. Greg, thank you, Kevin. Greg Widener, I think is his name. Greg Widener. His was short, though. It wasn't very long. All right. So last week on your show, we covered the Table of Nations. And I think we pretty much said everything that probably needed to be said for Genesis 10. Can you think of any dangling plot threads we didn't address, maybe?
Other than in some of the manuscripts, there is the story as far as, with regard to Abraham and how he's thrown into the furnace, and his birth is all talked about. And it's after this, but that's not included in the regular King James. And so I don't know if you want to go into that or what we're going to move into next.
Yeah, I quickly reviewed what we talked about last week, and so we would be going into Genesis 11. And then I thought, I looked at the Jubilees account from Jubilees 8, 9, and 10, and there was I just skimmed over it like 20 minutes ago, and there's quite a lot of interesting things in there. So I thought maybe we could do Genesis 11 and then backtrack a little bit and do Jubilees 8, 9, and 10. 10 will get us caught up into Tower of Babel.
Okay, cool.
So I can go ahead and read Genesis 11 from the King James, and if you want to get Jubilees 8 up.
I'll do the Targum after you do that, and then we can get into that.
I do. Cool. All right. Let me switch over here. Genesis chapter 11. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Selah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Selah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Selah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Selah lived after he begat Eber 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 230 years and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 207 years and begat sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he begat Nahor 200 years and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives, and the name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren, she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. That is like a really, really high-level cliff note version of this story. Genesis just gives you like the barest of necessities,
right,
to help you understand the main character that's being introduced here, being Abram.
Abram, yes.
But Joshua, we should probably jump into that too. We'll probably camp out here for a while, because between the Jubilees account, whatever you're going to read in the Targum, and if we get into the Joshua account, and I think it'd be fun to do that, because the Joshua account of the life of Abram, leading up to them being called out of the Chaldees, is quite a story.
Yeah, and I have some of the other stuff too, the Legends of the Jews, the Perkti, Rabbi Eleazar, and others open. So,
all right,
the Targum. And all the earth was of one language and one speech and one counsel. In the holy language spake they, that by which the world had been created at the beginning. And it was while they were journeying from the east that they found a plain in the land of Babel and dwelt there. Jerusalem and all the inhabitants of the earth were of one language and of one speech and of one counsel, for they spake the holy language by which the world was created at the beginning, while their hearts erred afterwards from the word of him who spake, and the world was at the beginning. And they found a plain in the land of Pontus and dwelt there. And they said, a man to his fellow, come, we will cast bricks and put them in the furnace. And they had brick for stone and slime for cement. And they said, come, we will build us a city and a tower, and the head of it shall come to the summit of the heavens, and we will make us an image for worship on the top of it, and put a sword in his hand to act against the array of war. Before that we be scattered on the face of the earth. And the Lord was revealed to punish them for the work of the city and the tower which the sons of men builded, Jerusalem. And they said, come now, and we will build us a city and a tower, and the head of it shall reach to the summit of the heavens, and we will make us in it a house of worship at the top, and we will put a sword in its hand, lest there be set against him the array of war, before we be scattered upon the face of all the earth. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and the language of all of them one. And this they have thought to do, and now they will not be restrained from doing whatever they imagine. And the Lord said to the 70 angels which stand before him, Come, we will descend, and we will there commingle their language, that a man shall not understand the speech of his neighbor. And the word of the Lord was revealed against the city, and with him 70 angels, having reference to 70 nations, each having its own language, and thence the writing of its own hand. And he dispersed them from thence upon the face of all the earth into 70 languages, and one knew not what his neighbor would say, but one slew the other, and they ceased from building the city. Therefore he called the name of it Babel, because there did the Lord commingle the speech of all the inhabitants of the earth. And from thence did the Lord disperse them upon the faces of all the earth. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was a son of 100 years, and he begat Arphaxad 2 years after the deluge. And Shem lived after he had begotten Arphaxad 500 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 30 and 5 years, and begat Shelach. And Arphaxad lived after he had begotten Shelach 430 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Shelach lived 30 years, and begat Eber. And Shelach lived after he had begotten Eber 403 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 34 years, and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he had begotten Peleg 430 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years, and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he had begotten Reu 209 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 32 years, and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he had begotten Serug 207 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years, and begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he had begotten Nahor 200 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years, and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he had begotten Terah 116 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years, and begat Abram, and Nahor, and Haran. These are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And it was when Nimrod had cast Abram into the furnace of fire, because he would not worship his idol, and the fire had no power to burn him, that Haran's heart became doubtful, saying, If Nimrod overcome, I will be on his side, but if Abram overcome, I will be on his side. And when all the people who were there saw that the fire had no power over Abram, they said in their hearts, Is not Haran the brother of Abram, full of divinations and charms? And has he not uttered spells over the fire that it should not burn his brother? Immediately, Minyad, out of hand, there fell fire from the high heavens and consumed him, and Haran died in the sight of Terah, his father, where he was burned in the land of his nativity, in the furnace of the fire which the Kasdai had made for Abram, his brother. And Abram and Nahor took to them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of the wife of Nahor, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, and the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah, who is Sarah. And Sarah was barren, she had no child. The Jerusalem Targum. And Sarah was barren, she had no son. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot bar Haran, the son of his son, and his daughter-in-law Sarah, the wife of Abram, his son, and went forth with them from Urah of the Kasdai to go to the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. It's interesting that this story does mention, the Targum here mentions, the whole thing with the fiery furnace in Abram.
Wow, so that was actually in the Targum.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing how much more. I mean, clearly the Targums, I mean, they added quite a bit of commentary.
Yeah, but I think this, this commentary was included in the original
text. Because, okay, so if we understand Targum is just the Hebrew word
translation, yeah.
So these are the first translations that came out of the Babylonian exile.
Right.
Presumably under what, Ezra, Nehemiah, and those guys?
Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniel, because even Daniel and Jeremiah, those books were written in Aramaic as well. So it was during that time while they were in the captivity of Babylon.
So if that's the case, then, I mean, if they're giving a faithful translation, then we've got a
so.
edited version.
Yeah, I do believe so, yeah. Because why would all of this commentary just be added in? Because it's a translation. They were translating from the Hebrew into Aramaic. And so it only makes sense to me. And then again, this is the oldest translation. It predates even the Septuagint by 200 years. So,
Wow. Wow. I mean, no wonder you have such a healthy regard for these Targum. Yeah. You've really given me a healthy respect for them as well, especially when I consider what you just said in terms of the chronology, because I've grown a really healthy respect for the Septuagint for reasons we've discussed in previous broadcasts, namely the fact that while the Hebrew language may have been limited to something like I think they say is like 8,000 words or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Prefixes and suffixes that you can add to change things around a bit, but the Greek had a much more robust vocabulary, and so like in the previous broadcast when I was showing you that website that has the color codes, what has amazed me is that here you have Hebrew scholars that know their Hebrew text, translating them into Greek, where they have a much bigger palette to play, more words to play with, so to speak. So they could pick appropriate word, more specific appropriate words in the translations, like in the case with rakia being stereoma, which way can be an air, gas, or the vacuum of space. And last week's we talked about Gibor or Giborim, the plural.
Right.
For Nimrod, they translated as gigas, the root from which we get gigantus or gigantic or giant. And yet they took the same Hebrew word, Gibor or Giborim, and translated tos dynatos, meaning strong, mighty warrior, for David's mighty men. Taking the same Hebrew word, but having a different historical context, they had more words to choose from in Greek. Them appropriate. But you're saying these Targums predate the Septuagint even by a few hundred years.
Yes.
And yet it has this much more elaboration in these stories than, what did we end up with?
Exactly. And why was this information removed? And who decided on taking it out? Because it's preserved there in the Aramaic.
That is really interesting to me. Because I mean everything from what's going on in Genesis 4:1 to what you just read just now.
And then again the whole thing of the word of the Lord, like even here the word of the Lord with his 70 angels coming down and commingling the languages. So you have Christ involved in the story.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, the word of the Lord and his 70. So that this is the Michael Heiser's dissertation.
The Council of the Mighty.
I may have issues with him on a variety of other topics, but I think he's right on target with the council stuff.
Right. And then again, with regard to the Aramaic Targum, in the first 5 books of the Pentateuch, the word of the Lord is represented there 217 times.
Wow.
And you find only in the King James 11 translations of the word of the Lord. And so over 200 times it's been removed or changed to just Lord.
So So then, do you think that the texts from which we ended up with the Textus Receptus and even other manuscripts that we now have for our English translations, do you think that those all started being tampered with after the first century?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that it was specific to remove connotation to Christ as the Word of the Lord and his being part of the pre-existent Godhead. And the fact that the Israelites worshipped a Trinity going back all the way to Adam.
Wow. That's amazing, man. I mean, it's making me really, my mind is like really open now to exploring this a lot more, because people always want to question, like Joshua, for instance. We've talked about in the previous broadcast, we won't talk about it now, but why we accept it. And I mean, one of the things that I've always used for my reason for accepting Joshua is the correlation in other accounts to it that are match for Legends of the Jews or various midrash that you can read from the rabbis or whatnot. I mean, they're all telling the same stories that we find in Joshua.
Yes.
But from what you just read, it sounds like you could make the same claim being in the Targum. For not all of it, certainly a lot of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, with regard to the Targum, you do find a lot of stories included that are confirmed in books like Jasher and Jubilees and the Perk-Day Rabbi Eleazar and the Legends of the Jews and other parallel accounts as well.
So I don't know if it mentioned anything specifically in what you just read, because I was kind of multitasking, so I may have missed it. Did the Targum mention anything about the size of the Tower of Babel and why they went to the plains of Shinar to build it?
It says that it was built to the summit of heaven. And then in the Chronicles of Jeremiah, it actually speaks about how they are trying to break through the firmament, which they're trying to wage war on God. And when we come back from the break, I'll pull that up and share.
Yeah, say we got about 3 minutes before the break, so if you could pull that up, and we'll look at Joshua and Jubilees and stuff, because it's funny. I published Genesis with the King James and the Septuagint side by side, as well as the entire book of First Enoch in the Charles translation, the entire book of Joshua and Jubilees in one volume. And even in the introduction and in some of my footnotes, because I did do a little bit of footnotes and wrote about some things in the Genesis and the Synchronized Biblically Endorsed Extra Biblical Text volume that I put out, I was at that time that was published in 2013, was still locked in the Copernican model of the cosmos. And people give me a hard time for it now because I got the globe on the cover, and I tell them, no, that's not the globe. That's not the globe. It's that's the circle of the Earth viewed at an angle. See at the rim there, so I don't have to redo the cover. But there are comments that I made inside there related to the globe, and it just goes to show you, when you look at text with a certain pair of glasses on.
Yes.
People gave us, that we're looking at these things through, we miss stuff. And I had always said, if you go back to my pre-2015 research, had said, it wasn't about height. If it was about height, they would have started building on a mountain, right? If it's about height, no, I built a plane. So clearly it wasn't about height, and so therefore the Tower of Babel must have been a stargate. Yeah.
Yes.
And of course. Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, all those guys, they're still on that page. And I was on that page largely because of what I was reading in their research.
Mm-hmm. And back then we're filtering everything through the whole concept of Copernican.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I would have come to the same conclusions. If they're trying to reach into heaven and they got this little stubby ziggurat thing in a valley, it had to mean something else, right? So therefore, with all the sci-fi stuff we've been programmed with, for decades, we're like, well, it must have been a Stargate. And yet in the text itself that I published, it tells you no, this thing is freaking huge.
Mhm.
Like, and as I started looking at other research, finding out that the base of this structure was on the low side 100 square miles, on the high side 200 square miles.
Right.
And now I'm like, oh, they needed a plane of Shinar because they needed a flat surface big enough to have a base for a structure that
Right.
was so huge that it would actually make an attempt to reach up to the firmament.
Mhm.
Wow. You know?
Yes. Yes. Amazing. Yeah. But that's true. It had to be wide enough at the base so that, they can continue as high as they needed to reach the summit of heaven.
And the text has been saying it all along. It's just
All along. Exactly.
we weren't seeing it because we were looking through the wrong lenses.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're going to break now. We'll talk some more when we come back.
All right.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
Which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm joined with Zen Garcia, and we're talking about Genesis chapter 11. And there's a book that Dr. Ken Johnson put out called Ancient Post-Flood History. And he makes some interesting observations in that book. Have you ever read that book, Zen?
No, I have not. I think I have it, though, actually, but I haven't read it yet.
It's a short book. I would advise you check it out. It's got some really good commentary specifically on this chapter. Although I don't remember him talking about the Tower of Babel so much as he was talking more about who went where and when as a result of the dispersion at the Tower of Babel. But he did make an interesting observation regarding the origin of what we might consider post-flood gods. The gods in the post-flood world. And we know in Genesis 6:4 it talks about that the offspring of the angels became great men of renown. And I believe that there are pre-flood men of renown and post-flood men of renown. However, the pre-flood men of renown, I think, were much more supernatural in nature, in the sense of being, hybrid offspring like that. Whereas the post-flood account of gods, while there may be some supernatural aspects to it in the sense of maybe people having various attributes and abilities, perhaps due to transhumanism, he makes the case, which is also known as euhemerism, that the gods of the ancient world can be traced back to humans, and just like regular humans. And he was making the observation that, look, Noah lived to be 950 years old and his sons to about 600 years old. The next generation lived to between 400 and 500 years of age. And Abraham's generation lived only to about 200 years of age. And then from Moses to today, people only live until about 120 years of age on the high side. And David said, it was Psalm 90:10, I think it is. It talks about man's days are 70 years, 80 if by strength.
Right.
Now, Ken Johnson was looking at this, and I made a chart up in my mythology and the Coming Great Deception. Of course, I need to make a chart showing overlaps to people and the ages and stuff like that. But in his book, he says, we can see how several myths might develop. First, people who only lived to about 200 years old would consider those living much longer to be immortals, and their parents, who apparently will never die, to be gods. I got a misspelling here. It says day, but it should be die, to be gods. But when the first 3 generations start dying off, rumors will develop about wars between the immortals and gods. After the languages change at the Tower of Babel, the legends would have been even more confused, with a variety of different names applied to each mortal or god. This is, again, the theory of euhemerism. If you look that up, it's a theory attributing the origin of the gods to the deification of historical heroes. And Clement of Alexandria even said, in reference to that, he says, those to whom you bow were once men like yourselves. So he's basically saying, look, if you're in that generation that's living, let's say, 100 to 200 years of age, like everybody that's born in this generation is dying out, by the time they're 200. And yet there are people walking around that are twice that old, and their grandparents or even great grandparents are still walking around. They're 600 years old or 500 years old. Now, just imagine what normal human ego would do in a situation like that, where, okay, you let's say you're in the generation that's living in the 500 time frame, and you got great grandchildren down there and offspring of other people looking at you, and they're about to die, they're on their deathbed in their late hundreds, and they're like, why are you still around? Well, how tempting would it be for you to say, well, I'm a god? And as these people are dying off, they would be, what are they going to say? Right? I mean, like, you guys must be immortals, and then they die, And so, I mean, just think about normal human ego, the way people work and the way people think, and think about the amount of wisdom, knowledge, and experience you'd have if you're living 500 years, as opposed to people who are living less than half of that. You'd be extremely smart. You'd have a lot of experience, and you probably are stronger. Obviously, living that much longer, you can
Larger stature, possibly
even larger stature being a part of it also. You could see how people would take advantage of that situation very easily, and even start to think of themselves as gods. Yeah, I guess I'm a god. Look how long I'm living, compared to everybody else. So I thought that was a really interesting and very reasonable observation of the first several, probably maybe up to 10 generations after the flood, dealing with these slow decline in longevity and how people could have taken advantage of that situation, and legends and stuff of the battles of this guy. This guy's 550 years old and he lived through all this and he fought those giants there, and
right. Yeah. And the stories, that he could tell, going all the way back. But there is a book, and I've sent it to you. It's called The Travels of Noah into Europe, and it's based on the repopulating of the earth after the flood of Noah's day. And it's like a Tables of Nations as well. But in that book, it also mentions the same thing with regard to the people that lived very long lives. Even Noah, even though he was, it says in the book that he was telling them that he was no god, but yet they were still attributing and worshiping him as such. And so the stories and of the longer generations that lived previous they were celebrated as heroes, and they were honored as the immortals or titans or whatever. And that book is even though it was translated in 1611, I believe, it's a book that holds basis to Berosus. And Berosus was the historian that Alexander the Great had commissioned to write the tales and the legends of the pre-flood giants and the dragon lords and the kings of old. He and Mantheo were the two historians that are especially honored, and his books are rare. You now only find mention of Berosus's works in other historians like Alexander Polyhistor and things of that nature.
There's what's his name? Diodorus Siculus, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of historians mention the work of Berosus, but this book was an actual translation from one of his surviving manuscripts, and so it's very interesting. It also speaks about that same theme, though.
Very cool. Somebody in the chat room reminded me of something I wanted to run by you before I forget. That came up during the Take on the World conference that just aired, and there's a video circulating right now. And actually, I remember when the Facebook post first started circulating back in I want to say it was 2015, about the blue sky stone, the blue ice of Antarctica. I'll put it up on the screen here for those watching on YouTube. You could go to Flat Earth Brothers YouTube channel and look up the video, what happened when they drilled into an ice wall near the firmament in the 1960s or in the 60s.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, I'll post the link in the chat room for everybody. Maybe we can look into that. But he's basically reading from an article that was circulating on Facebook back then, and I lost track of it, so I was so glad to see that somebody picked up on it. This video was just uploaded a few days ago. So he's basically reading the letter, and he's got some pretty cool visuals on the screen about it. But yeah, very, 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 very interesting. And it's what I've been saying all along is because I've met some people that were stationed in Antarctica and for years, and or back and forth, went back and forth. And this one guy I met, he had been there for quite some time. And I said, okay, in all the time that you were there, did you or anybody that you know of that you may have talked to, has anybody gone more than 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast? and he was not aware of anybody. And I met another guy. I think he worked for Raytheon or something, and neither was he. So, two people that I knew, that I met and personally talked to, that had been down there, were unaware of anybody having gone more than 800 to 1,200 miles inland from any place on the coastline. And so, I mean, this is what fueled all my speculation and everything when I started looking into the Operation Deep Freeze, and then the activity that immediately followed with the dig race, the missile race, the Operation, was it Fishbowl, Operation Fishbowl, part of Project Dominic, which means of the Lord, Fishbowl of the Lord, really. Like, everything that the United States and Russia did immediately after Deep Freeze is exactly what somebody would do if they found out that they were in a cage.
Right.
What are the boundaries? How deep, how high, how deep, can we dig under this thing? Can we get through this thing? I mean, everything that the United States and Russia did is exactly what somebody would do if they found out that they're in a cage. And when you watch this video here, the story is to be believed. Apparently they found this wall, this huge wall of this blue ice, and it doesn't melt and turn into water. It will melt, but it just disintegrates. But then as they figured out, and it was really super, super cold, like super cold. And they had trouble drilling into it. So they started doing some testing, I think, up in Greenland or something, until they found the right equipment that would work. And they went down there. And as they're trying to drill through this thing, it would like heal itself.
Wow.
It started to heal itself. So how much there is the story, I don't know, but it makes for fantastic seed plot line stuff.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
I could really pull from all this. But circling back around to the point of what we're reading about here in this broadcast, they were attempting to reach into heaven. And so you were going to look up something, I think, in the
Chronicles of Jeremiah, actually, this one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So right before we're talking about that.
Yeah, I'll share this with you. And actually, this particular account covers a great deal as far as the story of how Abraham ended up in the firmament and all that. But I'll just read this portion. It says,
the firmament. You said firmament.
Oh, sorry. Okay. For they had said, "Come and let us build ourselves a city, and let us take axes and break open the firmament, so that the water flow from there and descend below, that he may not do unto us as he did to the generation of the flood. And let us wage war with those in heaven, and establish ourselves there as gods." And so, again, the whole theme of building a tower to the summit of the heaven, this account says that, their intention was to break open the firmament so that they could invade the Holy of Holies, where God has established his throne room, and become gods, take over. Which, of course, they could never achieve. But
yeah, exactly. I'll read a portion from Joshua in this regard, and this is actually part 7 in the presentation that I'm doing in the Take on the World conference. So sort of a preview of one of the lectures. I think this one's tomorrow's lecture, so people will get a preview of it here. But we see in Genesis 11, that the whole earth was of one language, and they decided to build a tower that could reach into heaven. And what is extraordinary to me about this story is the response that Yahuwah says in the remaining verses there. I think it's probably verse 7 or something. He looks down, he says, this is what they're about. Now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Now, you have to go to Joshua and other accounts to figure out what they imagined to do. I don't believe it would be possible for them to kill God. Certainly not.
Oh, absolutely not.
However, the idea that they could build a structure that could reach into heaven, and they were making a pretty good go of it by the time Yahuwah decided to step in, that's extraordinary to me. I
was just going to mention one other thing as well before you go into the account. In the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophet, it tells the story of how Nimrod was planning on deceiving his fellows. He was going to shoot arrows that had blood on them and have them fall back down to the, so he could declare that he had killed God. And so his plan was to deceive his followers and, declare himself that he killed God and that he is now God. Oh, and then one other thing is that...
So I always wondered about that, because I remember reading about they shot arrows up there and it came back that there was blood on there. But you're saying that there's an account that he was trying to fool people, so he dipped the arrows in blood first and then...
yeah. Yeah, and then what happened afterwards is that because he declared himself as God, God placed a fly, a maggot was laid in his brain, and it began to eat his brain, and it drove him so crazy that he would have people beat him in the head, because he was in such pain, and he lived like that for a long time until he died. And so,
Wow.
God punished him for...
Do you know where it says that?
Yeah, I'll find it. It's in the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets.
Oh, yeah, awesome. So maybe you can look for that as I continue.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll do that.
That's fascinating. Dude, we're going to write one heck of an amazing script, man, when we finally sit down and work on this. So, yeah, in the presentation, I realized that it was about height after all. I used to say, it wasn't about God didn't freak out when we built the World Trade Centers or, the Empire State Building or anything like that. And back when I was sucking on the blue pill, I would have said he didn't freak out when we sent the Apollo rockets up to the moon either. Now, of course, I don't believe that anymore either. But I mean, that's another thing. If what NASA says is true, then basically Yahuwah needs to apologize to Nimrod,
Right.
because clearly if what NASA said is true, they've gone way beyond anything Nimrod was able to do. But of course, I don't believe anything that comes out of any space agency, NASA or any other ones for that matter. But as I started looking through the text, I saw that it was about height after all. In Jubilees chapter 10, it says, and they built it 43 years were they building it. So it took them 43 years, and they didn't even get to complete it. But as far as it took them 43 years to do it. Its breadth was 203 bricks, and the height of a brick was the third of one. Its height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms. The extent of one wall was 13 stades, and of the other 30 stades. Note, 5,433 cubits equals 8,150 feet. Like, these are huge bricks.
Mm-hmm.
In a book called Bible History of Old Testament, chapter 8, an individual named Alfred Edersheim said, of the magnificence of Babel, the capital of the empire of Nimrod, the mighty hunter, it is difficult to convey an adequate conception without entering into details foreign to our purpose. But some idea of it may be formed from its extent, which according to the lowest computation covered no less than 100 square miles, while the highest computation would make it over 200 square miles. Like, massively huge. And then we get to Joshua 9, and all the families assembled, consisting of about 600,000 men. And they went to see, and this is the other reason why I think we mentioned this last week, that the Tower of Babel was quite some time after the flood. It wasn't as early after the flood as the days of Peleg, which is only like, I think 100 or 150 years or something like that after the flood. It's quite some time out. It had to be long enough after, if this account is true, it had to be long enough time after the flood for people to procreate enough to get 600,000 men. Mm-hmm. I maintain, look, if you're living 600 years of age and you're having multiple wives, yeah, you could probably have a whole lot of kids, exponentially perhaps getting up to 600,000 within a few hundred years. Whatever the case, that's what Joshua says anyway. And they went to seek an extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower, and they sought in the whole earth, and they found none like one valley at the east of the land of Shinar, about 2 days' walk, and they journeyed there, and they dwelt there. And they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower that they had imagined to complete. And the building of the tower was unto them a transgression and a sin. And they began to build it, and whilst they were building against the Lord God of heaven, they imagined in their hearts to war against him and to ascend into heaven. Continuing verse 26. And all these people And all the families divided themselves in 3 parts. The first said, "We will ascend into heaven and fight against him." The second said, "We will ascend to heaven and place our own gods there and serve them." And the third part said, "We will ascend to heaven and smite him with bows and spears." And God knew all their works and all their evil thoughts, and he saw the city and the tower which they were building. And when they were building, they built themselves a great city and a very high and strong tower. And on account of its height, the mortar and bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent to it until those who went up had completed a full year. And after that, they reached to the builders and gave them the mortar and the bricks. Thus was it done daily. Now, that sounds ridiculous. It takes a year to get to the top of this thing, unless you realize they were carrying very, 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 very heavy loads up an extremely high structure. Like, then you can say, okay, yeah, I can see how it may have taken some time. And behold, those ascended and others descended the whole day. And if a brick should fall from their hands and get broken, they would all weep over it. And if a man fell and died, none of them would look at it. It was like, all the labor it took to get as high as they get. If they dropped the brick, they're like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" But if something fell off, they're like, whatever.
Right.
They kept moving on. Verse 32, Joshua 9. And God said to the 70 angels who stood foremost before him, to those who were near to him, saying, "Come, let us descend and confuse their tongues, that one man shall not understand the language of his neighbor." And they did so unto them. And from that day following, they forgot each man his neighbor's tongue, and they could not understand to speak in one tongue. And when the builder took from the hands of his neighbor lime or stone, which he did not order, the builder would cast it away and throw it upon his neighbor, that he would die. And they did so many days, and they killed many of them in this manner. And we got a few minutes before the break, so I'll just continue here. And the Lord smote the 3 divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and designs. Those who said, "We will ascend to heaven and serve our gods," became like apes and elephants. And those who said, "We will smite the heaven with arrows," the Lord killed them. One man through the hand of his neighbor. And the third division of those who said, "We will ascend to heaven and fight against him," the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. And those who were left amongst them, when they knew and understood the evil which was coming upon them, they forsook the building, and they also became scattered upon the face of the whole earth. And as I was reading verse 35, and thinking back on my time when I was a missionary in India, we were in northeast India, a little piece of India that's kind of squished on the northeastern side there. There were Hindu gods everywhere, and it may be like that through the whole country. I don't know, but just where I was, the Hindu gods were everywhere, and 2 of them stood out to me in relation to what I just read there, and that's the Hindu gods Hanuman and Ganesha.
Right.
Hanuman is a 8-headed human-bodied figure, and Ganesha is an elephant-headed human body figure. And incidentally, as I understand it, Obama used to have a good luck charm of Hanuman that he kept in his pocket. But I began to wonder, I'm like, did Yahuwah's judgment on the people at the Tower of Babel result in the creation of the Hindu gods? Like, I don't know, but that's rather interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fascinating. All of these stories, and then reconsidering everything when you look at the fullness of the context of all of them, and reading and studying them from all the different manuscripts.
Yeah, definitely. We got 3 minutes before the break. Is there anything you can read before that, or?
Yeah, I'll read that one portion. Let me get back to it. Okay, yeah, this is where, and I can read more of it when we come back, but it says, some shot arrows into the sky, and they came down tinged with blood. Then they shouted and cried, "See, we have killed everyone who is in heaven." And it also says that, curiously enough, there's a similar story told by the Chinese of one of their earlier monarchs who thought himself so great that he might war against heaven. He shot an arrow into the sky, and a drop of blood fell, and so he said, "I have killed God." And then it goes on into the story of Nimrod. And I was actually looking for that story of where, God punished him with the net.
So what was it that you just read from just now?
It's the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets, which it contains multiple stories of worldwide traditions the different accounts of the Old Testament prophets and patriarchs.
Very
it's a
cool.
fascinating text, yeah.
Somebody in the chat room agreed about the Hindu gods. He said, I used to be a Hindu. And he said, yeah, I think that's true, what we were talking about. I mean, and it is so bizarre because when I was there, I mean, they had all kinds of freaky gods. I mean, hundreds of them.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I was just going to say, it reminds me of the story again of, even like the dog-headed people and what we were talking about with the linemen of Moab and all of that.
Right. Well, I mean, they had to have their origin somewhere. In this case, if they were intending to set up their own gods in heaven, and he specifically singled out those people right there. Let me go back to that verse. In verse 35, and the Lord smote the three divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and designs. Those who said, we will ascend to heaven and serve our gods, became like apes and elephants. So if they had crafted gods that may perhaps look like this, and he's like, okay, you want to be like that?
Right.
Fine, I'll make you like that.
And,
hey,
maybe that's what happened to the dog-headed people, too.
Maybe.
Some way.
All right, we're going to break, and we come back, and maybe you can find that other passage you were talking about.
All right, looking for it now.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and as usual, time is flying by. We're already at the second half of the show, and you were going to look up some stuff there, Zen, before the break.
Yeah, let me see if this is it. According to Tabari, God sent an army of his flies against the hosts of Shalatimer and Nimrod, and these flies attacked the soldiers in their faces, and the flies were so numerous that the soldiers could not see one another, and the horses stung by them went mad and leaped and fell, so that what with the horses and the flies the army was entirely dispersed. Nimrod escaped to Babylon, but he was pursued by the meanest of the gnats of that host. It was blind of one eye and lame of one leg, and when Nimrod sat down on his throne, the gnat settled upon his knee. Then the tyrant smote at it, and it rose, flew up one of his nostrils, and entered his brain, which it began to devour. Nimrod beat his face and his head, and when he did so, the fly ceased gnawing at his brain, but he had no repose from his agonies, save when he was struck upon the head. Consequently, there was after that always someone stationed by him to strike his head. The king had a large blacksmith's hammer brought into his throne room, and with that his princes and nobles smote him on the head. And the more violent the blow, the greater was the relief afforded. Nimrod reigned 1,000 years before he felt the torment of the gnat. Up to that moment he had suffered no pains. He lived for 500 years with the fly eating at his brain, and all that while, night and day, there were relays of men to strike his head with the hammer.
Wow. That's quite a knucklehead. That's quite
right. I mean, the agony and the punishment. But I mean, if you're gonna declare yourself as God, I mean, what's more blasphemous than that?
You want to be God? Okay, you're gonna whack yourself in the head with a hammer for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that's brutal.
Brutal. Yes.
Jeez. What text was that from?
The Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets.
Wow. Wow, I'm gonna have to look that up. What chapter was that?
It is the chapter on Abraham.
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know. It's like I got this like Three Stooges thing in my head.
Right.
Like he's got these guys like sitting around him. Hey, I need a whack in the head.
Right. Yeah, the agony. It reminds me also, that Herod, he died with the worms eating him.
Yeah.
And so, but he did the same, declared himself to be as God, and then also in trying to kill Christ and slaughtering all those babies.
He said he began to beat himself in the face. I gotta tell this. When I joined the army, of course, you got to go to boot camp, and I was so naive and 18-year-old kid down there, and when we got down there, something happened and our cycle got delayed a little bit, so they brought us to this, like we found out later, it was just a reception area. And we were there for like a week or so before going to actual basic training. And it was pretty awesome. I mean, it was like, we woke up at like 10 o'clock in the morning, we were in bed by like 10 o'clock at night. And, we had classes during the day and stuff. And I'm like, man, this must be the kinder, gentler army I always heard about. It was coming. Right. And then got the wake up call. No, now we're going to the real deal. So we got all our equipment, and actually first they put us all in this big room, and they had all these doors to the left of where we were sitting, and the class was before us. They'd go in with their civilian clothes, come out in their underwear, go in, to another door, come out bald, go in another door, then they come out the other door with blood dripping down their arm and this terror on their faces as they're holding their arm, and then they go in this other room and disappear, and we never saw them again. Right. So,
oh gosh.
and I kept looking looking over, they're like, what is happening to these people? You know? And the drill sergeant's like, Skiba, you got something wrong with your neck, boy? I'm like, no, drill sergeant. They actually made me go stand in the corner with hose in the corner so I couldn't turn my head. Like, apparently, what's wrong with your neck, boy? So I stuck my neck up. And then they continued whatever they're doing. And then we were next. So we go in there. And, you know, we go in our civilian clothes, come out, in our underwear, go in, get our uniforms, and we're carrying all this stuff out. We go in this other room, they shave our heads. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what, I watched too many Looney Tunes shows or something growing up. The dude in front of me had this perfect Q-tip look, these big ears sticking out. Like, it was like I was looking at a Q-tip with ears, you know? Everything just made me laugh. Like, I was, and I kept getting in trouble. Well, then we go into this room, and they had these guys on either side with air guns that were full of shots. And the guy had a hair lip, and he talked like this. He talked kind of funny. He's like, okay, you know, keeping in mind safety as our primary consideration, be sure not to move, because when the air gun goes off, it will shred your skin. Next. And the guy on the left would inevitably shoot like a half a second before the guy on the right did, and you would twitch. And so it would make your right arm bleed. So then when you walked out holding your bleeding arm, the next class, you know, hey, Murphy, what's wrong? You got something wrong with your neck, boy? Looking at, you know, with her bloody arm. Right. So they take us to the barracks, and I'm a stomach sleeper, and I'm like one of these guys. I'm like a rotisserie chicken. I'm flipping all night. Well, they made us lay in our beds at attention, lay on our backs at attention, right? They scared us to death, right? You will lay and sleep at attention. You know, I'm like, what? So, you know, I was so scared I did, but it's like 4:00 in the morning. Jill threw a garbage can down the middle of the barracks and, you know, started banging on the lid. Get up, get up, get up.
Oh my gosh.
And I shot out of bed so fast, like, what? There was I was in the lower bunk, and there was a little railing about 6 inches below the upper bunk, like a support beam. I got right across the middle of my forehead. Pow! Really knocked. I'm laying there, and as I start to come to, I got this silhouette of this drill sergeant. What do you think this is? The Marriott, boy? Get up, get up, get up! So we run outside, and they have us flipping around doing, you know, push-ups and sit-ups and flutter kicks and stuff. Then they take us to the first sergeant's office, and we had to get our meal card, and this is a card you had to show anytime you went to the chow line. So if you didn't have it, you didn't get to eat, right? And I don't know how it happened, but somehow I ended up being the first unlucky schmuck at the front of this whole line of, you know, over 100 guys. And so the drill sergeant, we're standing outside the first sergeant's office. He goes, okay, when you get into the first sergeant's office, say this, that, the other thing. Okay. And he said all his instructions we're supposed to do. He said, all right, get in there, Skiba. I forgot everything he said, like right after he said it. And, you know, I do my best, you know, march forward, right face. And just as I open the door, there's a drill sergeant on the inside. He goes, "Oh my God!" And they start out everything they said started out with, "Oh my God!" He's like, "Oh my God! You're bringing snakes into the first sergeant's office." I'm like, "Snakes!" I'm freaking out. So get out of here. So they send me outside, and of course the other drill sergeants that are out there realize I screwed up, because otherwise I'd be in the first sergeant's office. So they all surround me with their Smokey the Bear. They got the Smokey the Bear hats, you know, and like the brim of their hats are like connected to my head. So I've got like this. His nose is right up against my nose. Right. What happened, Private? What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. They said I brought snakes into the first sergeant's office. He's like, snakes? Oh my God! I'm like, I know. Oh my God. Massachusetts. I'm in Fort McClellan, Alabama, right? I'm thinking copperheads or something. I didn't know. So he's like, boy, beat your face. I'm like, beat my face? He goes, beat your face. I'm like, all right. So I start smacking myself in the face, right? They let me do this for quite some time. Finally, one of the drills stops me. He grabs my hand. He's like, what are you, some kind of moron? I'm like, so this guy goes, he points to the guy who told me to beat my face. He goes, what did he tell you to do? I said, he told me to beat my face. He goes, well, you better knock him out, boy. I'm like, knock him out. He goes, knock him out. I'm looking at this guy. He's like huge, right? I'm like, no, drill sergeant. He goes, no, drill sergeant. This other guy like tackles him. He's like, well, he told you to beat your face. I did. He goes, well, he told me to knock him out. I'm like, no, drill sergeant. He goes, boy, he said, you better kiss Alabama right now. I'm like, kiss Alabama, kiss Alabama. I'm like, okay. So I get down on the ground and I start making out with the dirt. I don't know. He grabs me by the back of my neck and he holds me up and I got like dirt in my mouth. He goes, boy, you really are a moron. I'm like, yes. So he drops me and he picks me back up and he goes, okay, well, we tell you to beat your face or knock him out or kiss Alabama. That means do push-ups. I'm like, oh, I could do that. So,
oh my God!
About 50 of them. He goes, what? We tell you to beat your face, knock him out, or kiss Alabama. You're only supposed to do 10. Now get back down. Okay.
Oh my goodness!
First sergeant's office. I'm like, okay. I still don't know what I did wrong. I screwed up 6 times just trying to get it in the.
Just to get your meal card.
Just trying to, and meanwhile, like everybody else is watching me. They wouldn't let anybody else go in until I did it right.
You were the example.
I was the example, and I brought a couple of my buddies in with me when we joined the military. We went together, so they're watching what's happening to me. They're like, "What did you get me into?" I'm like, "I don't know, man."
Right.
Somewhere along the line, I figured out what they're talking about. When they said snakes, it meant your boot lace was sticking out. One of my shoelaces was sticking out. And they called them snakes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, dude, it took me forever to get that out. But when you say, that's why I was laughing so hard when you're talking about
right.
Nimrod.
Reminds you of all that, huh?
Nimrod started beating his face. I'm like, okay, I get it. Sorry for the rabbit trail, but
oh yeah, no, it's good.
It's triggered me, man. You triggered me.
Yeah. That's a funny story.
Wow. So how long did he have this thing eating his brain?
It said for 500 years.
500 years he dealt with. That's one long living maggot.
Yeah.
Must have been reproducing.
Not sure, but God was punishing him. So, however, God can do whatever He wants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine he was that effective a leader after that.
Right, and actually, I think in the story, because of his acting this way, they started to doubt, his competency to rule.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
He would no longer be king of the world. Well, I mean, the Tower of Babel would have been, whatever you were just describing there would have been something that obviously took place at some point after the dispersion and the languages and everything like that. And so, at the time when the earth, everybody went away, 70 different languages, it becomes easy to understand how Nimrod could have been known by many other names, because everybody would have went away from that same location. Here was the king of the world with all these great ambitions that they were all for this guy, and now they're leaving that site talking in different languages. So the same guy would become known by many different names throughout different cultures. And of course, over time, the stories would have been embellished, and all kinds of stuff would happen. And it made me wonder, because I can see a really pretty solid connection between Osiris and Nimrod. And you have in the Egyptian mythology was it 72 conspirators of Set, and they were responsible. His brother killed him. All of that. But in Joshua, we see that it was Esau that cut off his head. But if you read the story, I think he was just going on like a hunting expedition, and he and Nimrod and a bunch of his buddies and they split up into teams, and I think it was Nimrod and I think 2 other guys that were with
the King's Guard.
When Esau waited in hiding and waited for an opportune time, and he rushed out and killed him. Chopped off his head. He
was trying to get the vestures of light from the garments of power.
Right. So and for people who are listening, the story where Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of beans makes a whole lot more sense when you read the Joshua account of this. That story happens right after he kills Nimrod. Like He kills Nimrod and the two guys that are with him, and then the other guys hear the commotion, and so Esau takes the
They're
cloak
chasing them. Yeah.
and runs off, and apparently escapes them. And then he's like, look, I don't care. What do I care about my birthright? Just give me something to eat, lest I die.
He was famished. He didn't think he was going to make it through the night, anyways.
Yeah, he didn't think he was going to make it, and because the story doesn't make any sense at all. Otherwise, when you read Genesis, like he sells his birthright for, here's a mighty hunter. First of all, his dad loved him because that's my boy. He brings home the venison, right? Esau was a hunter. And yet he sells his birthright for a bowl of beans. It makes no sense in the Genesis story.
Right.
It makes total sense in the larger context of Joshua and killing him. But the point would be is that he kills Nimrod, chops off his head, and kills the other two guys that were with Nimrod. And the other people that were part of the hunting party, they weren't there. They came and saw the aftermath of it.
Mm-hmm. They heard the yells and came.
Yeah, so nobody would have been there no one would have seen it. No one would have witnessed what happened. So the opportunity to make up stories of how Nimrod the Great was killed, who did it, you could easily see how people would try to take credit for it and how some of these other stories may have developed.
Right. One other thing with regard to that, and I cover this in my Vestures of Light and Rod of Wonder, is that one of the aspects of the trade that Jacob makes with Esau for his birthright and also access to the cave of Machpelah and the rights to be buried there is that he trades him the sword of Methuselah, which is a supernatural sword.
Wow.
And it's spoken about in the Legends of the Jews that this was a giant killer. It was a sword that was used and it had supernatural properties in some manner, and it was a giant killer. And so Jacob had received that from his father, and he traded that as part of the for the birthright, and also gave him a large pile of both gold and silver.
So who received it? Who ended up with it?
Esau ended up with it.
So Jacob,
remember? Yeah, Jacob traded Esau the sword of Methuselah, which, in the story, it also says that Esau would live by the sword. And it was this supernatural sword, which he had.
Wow. Okay, wait a minute. First of all, where is that from, and how did Jacob end up with it?
It was given to him by his father, Isaac.
So, okay, Isaac, how did Abraham get it?
I believe that it was passed on. Methuselah passed it on to the patriarchs and to
must have given it to
Lamech, and then to Noah, and then Noah, and on. Shem and whoever, and Abraham.
Abram lived with Shem and Noah for a period of time. Right. So
actually, Abram and Jacob was living there with Abram. And Abram passed away that night. It was Passover, and his father was mourning.
That's correct.
And that's why he was, doing the lentils, which was a
very
traditional meal for mourning. And that's when he traded it off. But yeah, all that is covered in great detail in that Vestures of Light book.
Oh wow, man! I'm looking forward to that because we're working on the Seed video game, and. And it deals with Methuselah and right before the flood and everything. So I wasn't aware of any giant slaying sword of Methuselah. Like, that's just way cool.
Yeah. I'll see if I can look it up while we're, when we go to the next break.
Yeah, we'll go to break in about 7 minutes. But boy, that would really play in good for some of the plots that we're working on the video game side of things.
And it helps, to understand the story of the birthright, because why would he just trade for a bowl of pottage?
Yeah.
Porridge, his old birthright. But when you understand that he got the sword of Methuselah as part of the trade, then things, pique your interest.
Well, yeah, that's interesting about the sword. So what happened to it after Esau? Does anything?
No, I've never heard of what happens again after that.
I
just found it.
I read something somewhere that that the garment from, it went from Adam to Enoch to Methuselah to Noah to Shem, or stolen by Ham, and then to Cush, passed down to Nimrod. And then when Esau killed Nimrod, he had it next. But it seems like it showed up again later. I don't know if it was Elijah or somebody.
Well, no, it goes from after Rebecca saw where Esau had hid them, and she gives them to Jacob. And then Jacob gives them to Judah, but he loses the birthright because of the whole trial with Tamar. And then so he takes them back as far as the rod, and then gives them to Joseph. And then after Joseph dies, then the Pharaoh takes him, and they empty out his house and take all of his belongings. And then Ruel, who is Jethro, Moshe's father-in-law, ends up being his father-in-law. He takes them because he was an advisor of Pharaoh, and takes them with him. And as he's walking in his garden, the limb, the rod of wonder, roots and becomes sticks into the ground, and he can't pull it out. Well, when Moshe goes there, he is able to pull it out, and that's when Zipporah is given to him. But I just found this passage. I'll read it to you real quick. It says, "The scorn manifested by Esau for the resurrection of the dead, he felt also for the promise of God to give the Holy Land to the seed of Abraham. He did not believe in it, and therefore he was willing to cede his birthright and the blessing attached thereto in exchange for a mess of pottage. In addition, Jacob paid him in coin, and besides, he gave him what was more than money, the wonderful sword of Methuselah, which Isaac had inherited from Abraham and bestowed upon Jacob."
Wow. Huh. It's kind of amazing that Jacob would have been willing to part with that.
He was more worried or concerned with getting the garments and power, and also the rod of wonder, because that was what was necessary to be initiated in the order of the ancients, which is a whole nother aspect of the story.
Yeah, that's part of the Melchizedek thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And this was a birthright that was passed on, on and on. Well, actually, let me just read a little bit more. It says, "Esau made game of Jacob. He invited his associates to feast at his brother's table, saying, 'Know ye what I did to this Jacob? I ate his lentils, drank his wine, amused myself at his expense, and sold my birthright to him.' All that Jacob replied was, 'Eat, and may it be do thee good.' But the Lord said, 'Thou despisest thy birthright, therefore I shall make thee despised in all generations.' And by way of the punishment for denying God and the resurrection of the dead, the descendants of Esau were cut off from the world. As naught was holy to Esau, Jacob made him swear concerning the birthright by the life of their father. For he knew Esau's love for Isaac, that it was strong, nor did he fail to have a document made out, duly signed by witnesses, setting forth that Esau had sold him the birthright together with his claim upon a place in the cave of Machpelah. Though no blame can attach to Jacob for all this, yet he secured the birthright from him by cunning, and therefore the descendants of Jacob had to serve the descendants of Esau." And so, the story goes also that when Joseph is taking Jacob to be buried in the cave of Machpelah, that Esau contends and would not let them take him there. And so he gets his brother Naphtali to run back to Egypt to get a copy of this document, and then brings it forth. And then the child of Dan, I forget his name right now, but he ends up killing Esau for, preventing his grandfather from being buried. And so that whole story is in the book of Jasher as well.
Wow. Yeah, man, we may have to just do a whole series just on Jasher, because it's there's a lot of cool stuff right here. I mean, we entered Lord of the Rings territory quite some time ago.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
and one last thing with the sword of Methuselah, it is mentioned somewhere else there are two witnesses to this. I have another account of the sword of Methuselah somewhere in that Vestures of Light book, and then this one from the Legends of the Jews. So two confirming witnesses.
I am totally looking that up right now. So have you published that book?
Yes, I have the Vestures of Light and the Rod of Wonder. It's the two books. Well, it's 3 books back now. I just released the Pre-Adamites and the Antediluvian World, and I'm about to release the Dragon Lords and the Antediluvian Kings, which is the second in the series of the Pre-Adamite book.
Just a quick search on this, and apparently from the Sleepy Hollow, I guess, TV series, they actually have something apparently in that show.
Really?
That was the first thing that popped up. The sword of Methuselah, also known as Enoch's sword, is a powerful blade that possesses the power to defeat any being on earth, including demons such as Moloch. However, whoever uses the sword to take a life shall have their own soul taken in exchange by the sword. So it appears the blade can grant swordsmanship skills and stuff. But apparently this is like a wiki fan page, something or another from Sleepy Hollow.
Well, somebody did some research there.
Well, a lot of these shows like that, they do their research. I mean, they actually do pull out, they take a lot of creative liberties, certainly, but they do their research and pull some of these things out, which the same thing I'm going to be doing is find as many cool things I can and use that as back stuff. Right.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
Become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, for the final half-hour segment of the broadcast. We are talking about a lot of really cool stuff. And listen, guys, if you really want this to get out to the masses, I mean, we're going to reach a few thousand people here on YouTube. That's cool. Imagine how many more people we could reach with a mainstream-style television series that has this stuff as the plot content. That's what we're trying to do. That's exactly what we're trying to do at Seed. So check out seedtheseries.com. Help us make this happen. I'm not going to go through the studios. The only way it's going to happen is if we link arms and do this together. But were you able to look up any more cool stuff during the break?
Yeah, I got the whole story here from this other account. So I'll just read it, and then it'll give you the fullness of what I'm talking about. It says that the men slain by Esau on this day were Nimrod and two of his adjutants. A long-standing feud had existed between Esau and Nimrod because the mighty hunter before the Lord was jealous of Esau, who also devoted himself assiduously to the chase. Once when he was hunting, it happened that Nimrod was separated from his people. Only 2 men were with him. Esau, who lay in ambush, noticed his isolation and waited until he should pass his covert. Then he threw himself upon Nimrod suddenly and felled him and his 2 companions, who hastened to his succor. The outcries of the latter brought attendants of Nimrod to the spot where he lay dead, but not before Esau had stripped him of his garments. Those are the garments of power, the vestures of light, and fled to the city with them. These garments of Nimrod had an extraordinary effect upon cattle, beasts, and birds. Of their own accord they would come and prostrate themselves before him who was arrayed in them. Thus Nimrod and Esau after him were able to rule over men and beasts. After slaying Nimrod, Esau hastened cityward in great fear of his victim's followers. Tired and exhausted, he arrived at home to find Jacob busy preparing a dish of lentils. Numerous male and female slaves were in Isaac's household. Nevertheless, Jacob was so simple and modest in his demeanor that if he came home late from Bet Ha-Midrash, he would disturb none to prepare his meal, but would do it himself. On this occasion, he was cooking lentils for his father to serve him as his mourner's meal after the death of Abraham. Adam and Eve had eaten lentils after the murder of Abel, and so had the parents of Haran when he perished in the fiery furnace. The reason they are used for the mourner's meal is that the round lentil symbolizes death. As the lentil rolls, so death, sorrow, and mourning constantly roll about among men from one to the other. Esau accosted Jacob thus, "Why art thou preparing lentils?" Jacob, "Because our grandfather passed away. They shall be a sign of my grief and mourning, that he may love me in the days to come." Esau, "Thou fool, dost thou really think it possible that man should come to life again after he has been dead and has moldered in the grave?" He continued to taunt Jacob. "Why dost thou give thyself so much trouble?" he said. "Lift up thine eyes, and thou wilt see that all men eat whatever comes to hand, fish, creeping and crawling creatures, swine's flesh, and all sorts of things like these, and thou vexest thyself about a dish of lentils?" Jacob, "If we act like other men, what shall we do on the day of the Lord, the day on which the pious will receive their reward, when a herald will proclaim, 'Where is he that weigheth the deeds of men? Where is he that counteth?' Esau, is there a future world? Or will the dead be called back to life? If it were so, why hath not Adam returned? Hast thou heard that Noah, through whom the world was raised anew, hath reappeared? Yea, Abraham, the friend of God, more beloved of him than any man, hath he come to life again? Jacob, if thou art of the opinion that there is no future world, and that the dead do not rise to new life, then why dost thou want thy birthright? Sell it to me, now while it is yet possible to do so. Once the Torah is revealed, it cannot be done. Verily, there is a future world in which the righteous receive their reward. I tell thee this, lest thou say later I deceived thee. Jacob was little concerned about the double share of the inheritance that went with the birthright. What he thought of was the priestly service, which was the prerogative of the firstborn in ancient times. And Jacob was loth to have his impious brother Esau play the priest, he who despised all divine service. The scorn manifested by Esau for the resurrection of the dead, he felt also for the promise of God to give the Holy Land to the seed of Abraham. He did not believe in it, and therefore he was willing to cede his birthright and the blessing attached there in exchange for a mess of pottage. In addition, Jacob paid him in coin, and besides, he gave him what was more than money, the wonderful sword of Methuselah, which Isaac had inherited from Abraham and bestowed upon Jacob. So that's the story.
What were you reading?
The Legends of the Jews, chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. And so, what I was talking about with the birthright, as far as being connected to the initiation into the order of the ancients, that along with the garments of power and the rod of wonder, those that inherited the birthright or those particular possessions and items, they were initiated into this what is the Melchizedek order of the ancients. And so that was passed on along with the kingship, except for when it was separated after after Jacob. It was separated with Judah and Levi. And then it was restored with Yahushua, Christ, that priest, prophet, and king, and everything was brought back together. And so, this story covers that in greater detail.
Man, that's fantastic. I met a guy named Daniel who had taken a Nazirite vow. And the thing is about taking a Nazirite vow today is if you're going to do that, it's a lifelong commitment. There's no Levitical priesthood, no legitimate Levitical priesthood, because you have to end your vow in front of a Levitical priest. And since there is no legitimate Levitical priesthood in place right now, if you take a Nazirite vow today, it's till death do you part, And so, his hair has gotten quite lengthy, and he sold everything, and he and his wife, they live purely on faith and the good graces of others, taking them in, and Yahuwah provides all of their needs in that way. And usually whenever a family takes him in, he ministers to them until, such time as, it's time for him to leave and go someplace else. Well, he was staying with a guy that was leading these Torah studies when we first got into it. And he had made this chart up that was very detailed. Like his whole thing was trying to understand the Melchizedek order. Because we see in Hebrews that Yeshua is in the order of Melchizedek. Right. It's an order. And so many people think the way it's written in the book of Hebrews that, who has no father or mother, that it has to be Yeshua that Abraham met with at the end of the Genesis 14 war, which is giants. The Genesis 14 war, Josephus tells you point blank, this is a war of giants. I've got a timeline chart up on the screen for people that I made a while back. Again, I need to put it in a timeline so I can kind of wrap my head around everything. But 5 kings of giants versus 4 kings of giants, and the 4 kings beat the 5 kings, chased them into the slime pits that after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that's that area right there. And I became convinced, and I talked to both Dr. Aaron Judkins as well as Dr. Judd Burton, and said, "Guys, take a look at my research here and tell me what you think. You know, kind of go in behind me and poke holes in my theory if you can." And they thought that I was right on target. And I was saying that I think the greatest archaeological find of all time is waiting for us at the Dead Sea, in the area where the 5 kings were, basically fell into like quicksand.
Right, yeah.
All that bitumen, salt, and everything, they're probably very well preserved. I'm thinking there's a massive archaeological dig waiting for us there with these armies of giants.
Right. Like the La Brea tar pits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Judd Burton's like, "Yeah, man, I think you're right." In fact, he was gonna, when I went to Cape Town and Pretoria, the host that brought us, Sheila and I, to Pretoria, South Africa, he wanted to, at one point, he wanted to fund it. But Judd wasn't able to really make that happen, at least not at the time, because he had connections in Israel. I mean, you can't just go dig in there. I mean, you got to get all kinds of permissions and permits and stuff with the nation of Israel. But at any rate, after that war, we know that the Kedar Laomer, who was like the right-hand man general patent to Amraphel, who was Nimrod.
Yes.
They took Lot and his family as spoils of war, and that's where Abraham's like, "No, I don't think so."
Right.
And, forget Gerard Butler, right? We got 300.
Right, 317.
Yeah, 318.
Yeah.
With Abram and his buddies there, and Abram partnered up with Mamre, Anar, and Eshcol, who were, best I could tell, were good giants, Amorite giants who helped Abram to get Lot back. But anyway, it's after that war that he comes back and he has this conversation with Melchizedek. And many people, because of the book of Hebrews, the way it's written, think, well, with no father and mother, it's got to be Yeshua. Well, Yeshua had both a father and a mother.
Right.
Yahuwah is the father and Mary is the mother. So, but they're saying, well, because Yeshua was in the beginning with God, he was the word that was with God and was God and all that Melchizedek must have been him. And I'm like, well, if you go that route, then you have to believe that Yeshua ruled and reigned on earth as a physical person for an extended period of time over extended plots of land before his advent. Mary. And I'm like, no, Joshua tells you point blank that Shem was the Melchizedek at that time. And Daniel, that guy that took the Nazarite vow, he had all these charts and everything. I remember we had this long hallway, and he pulled out this chart, and he had all this detailed stuff on there. But the reason Hebrews is written the way it is because Adam was the first one, and
exactly, yes, that's right.
Their mother, he was dirt,
right?
And of course, then it gets passed down, and it was always to go to the firstborn son, but it never did because there's always some kind of issue. Something always came up, and that's why one of the other reasons why Yeshua is referred to as the firstborn of many. And I'm of the opinion that because, and I've heard some interesting research regarding Yeshua's ancestry because of Mary being a cousin to Elizabeth and John the Baptist being the legitimate high priest of, I think it's the Zadok order, I think. At any rate, John the Baptist was the legitimate high priest, which means he had to have traced back to Levi. So if Elizabeth's family traces back to Levi and Mary's a cousin to Elizabeth, then Yeshua had not only blood ties to Judah, but he would have had blood ties to Levi, Aaron.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's confirmed in that that I sent you a book called On the Priesthood of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And it confirms that there.
Yes. So he would have a blood tie right to Melchizedek, to Melchizedekhood, if you can say that. But I maintain that at the Passover meal that some call the Last Supper, he fits the requirements for a Nazarite vow. Because the requirement of a Nazarite vow is to abstain from the fruit of the vine and to declare a duration. And he did both. I'm not going to drink again of this until I drink it new with you in the kingdom.
Right.
And so I'm of the opinion that he took a Nazarite vow, and that perhaps, and also with the bloodline ties through both Mary and Elizabeth, was able to perform priestly duties as a king of the line of Judah.
Yes.
But also a priest. So he, as you said, it was the Melchizedek started with Adam, went all the way through to Jacob, and then was split with the kingship going to Judah and the priesthood going to Levi, and that's not reunited again until we get to Yeshua.
Exactly. Yes, that's right.
So, but now you're adding another whole element to all of this with this sword of power and all this stuff. It makes me think, okay, wait a minute, like whatever happened to that sword, and is this maybe something?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Be wielding this sword? I don't know.
I've only seen 2 mentions of it in all of the manuscripts I've ever read. So,
wow.
But yeah, I would love to learn more about that. But you know, the whole thing of the garments of power and the rod of wonder, that was all so exciting for me to put and piece that story together. But yeah, I would love to learn more about the sword of Methuselah. But
well, even the rod, the lure that we have. The Greeks were great at stealing other people's mythology and then just customizing themselves. You know,
right?
And so you have like the golden fleece in the Greek, and you look at the golden
and Excalibur.
And that's what I was going to say. The Excalibur story about the sword in the stone was long predated by the story of Moses.
Yes, Moses.
And he was only one. And of course, you got Thor and the hammer that only the righteous, pure-hearted can lift. And it makes you think, maybe all this actually does have some sort of legitimacy going back to more of a Hebrew roots side of things.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree. And that's why, for me, it's exciting to read all these various parallel accounts, because you learn a lot of these extra details, and especially with the Targum, because that's where I first read about the Vestures of Light, and then went on a search, about, and then tracked and traced down that story. But with regard to the Order of the Ancients, we have also released a book. And for people that are interested in all the books that I'm talking about, you can find all of them at sacredwordpublishing.com. But we also released a book on the Order of the Ancients, and I tracked down and covered the Melchizedek priesthood in that particular manuscript as well. So.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, there's just so much.
There is so much.
If people are looking at the chart that I've got on there, I try to capture as much of the story as I could between the life of Nimrod and the life of Abraham. Mm-hmm. And, after Sarah dies, he's negotiating with Ephron of the Hittites.
Right, yeah.
Who Ephron means fawn-like, and the Hittites are drawing carvings of satyrs.
Satyrs, right.
I think we talked about this. Was it last week? Did we talk about this last week?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you start seeing all kinds of animal-human stuff afterwards, the post-flood chimeras, like the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, the lion man. That's right. We talked about lion men last week.
Yeah, the lion men.
So, have you ever thought about trying to create this all-encompassing storybook?
Yeah, I have. And what I thought of doing is like creating a super narrative, and where I take all of the stories of all these different parallel accounts and put them all into order according to the Old Testament patriarch and character. And I also thought about, too, that, after we do the Book of Enoch, that we should do the full story of the life of Yahushua, beginning with the ascension of Isaiah, where he descends out of the heavens, where he's given the commission by the Father and the Holy Spirit to descend down through the 7 heavens and enter into the womb of Mary, where he would be immaculately conceived, and then cover all of the infancy stories as well, because there's so many fascinating stories about the infancy and how Mary, cured leprosy and demonic possession with his bathwater and with his swaddling clothes. And
wow, dude. We'll be making shows for the next 50 years.
I know, man.
Well, at least I know what I'm doing every other week anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
For my show, that makes it a whole lot easier for booking guests and stuff anyway.
Well, there's so much interesting information, and like if we ever get through what we're doing with the whole Genesis Revisited narrative, and if we ever did like a New Testament type of thing and bring the fullness of the story of Christ out, oh my goodness. Because, we just, in our digital book readers club, where we meet every Saturday and read with a group of people, our last manuscript that we went through, the book, was the Yahushua Christ, the infancy, early childhood, and lost years. And everybody loved doing that study. It's deeply moving. I mean, reading the infancy gospels, it will bring you to tears, because you're literally studying, and how he knew, even told the story about how, the thief that had spared Joseph and Mary and given them safe passage through a part where they used to all burglar, and he told his mother that this would be the thief that would die on the cross with me when.
Wow.
Yeah, told him the prophecy, and that he would spare him then, and take him into paradise. And his mother says, "God forbid that should ever happen to you." But he knew, even as a 4-year-old child, 3-year-old child, whatever, going into Egypt, that he's going to be on the cross.
So wait a minute. So there was a young thief that helped Mary and Joseph and baby Yeshua on the path to Egypt, and then 30 years or so, 20-something years later, or whatever, he's the same thief that's on the cross?
Yeah, actually, both of them, the two thieves that end up on the cross with him, he bribes the other thief to allow them to go through, and gives him all of his possessions that he had stolen over that week, so that he wouldn't wake up the rest of the brigands, and to theft, to steal from Mary and Joseph, and to give them a hard time. And so that's when he tells them, Christ tells them, I'll spare him and I'll reward him for what he's doing now when persecuted and he is crucified with me.
Wow.
Yeah, the stories are amazing.
People are asking, do you believe the infancy gospels are true? For me, I don't know if they are or not. I know that when they were trying to figure out what to make as far as a canon, they had all kinds of debates about what they're going to keep and what they weren't going to keep. For me, any of these texts, we've talked about this many times before. If it doesn't contradict with Scripture, I just think, hey, what? It's interesting commentary. If it's just fanciful storytelling, okay, maybe it is. But like the TV series The Chosen, they're sticking to the biblical narrative, but taking license and filling in the gaps.
Right.
All we get is bullet points in the Gospels and a highlight of the story. But what they're doing in The Chosen is they're like, okay, let's look at all the people that interacted with Yeshua. These were regular people. Let's tell their story.
Right.
And I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet, brother, but this.
Oh, I did, and I've already
have you
watched all of them. Yeah, and I was, and that's what got me actually excited to do these stories, and even the story of Christ in this way, including all the infancy narratives. And yes, I do believe that there are multiple witnesses for them being inspired to some degree, because you have to remember that they were written by both James and Thomas, who were his half brothers that grew up with him and knew Mary as their stepmother. And so, who better to write the stories of the life and the parentage of Mary, as well as the childhood of Christ. And so,
wow. So you saw it, man. The John 3:16 scene with Nicodemus was, oh man, that was so well done. So well done.
All of them. I literally cried probably at every episode, just like you were talking about.
I did too, man. I there was not one episode. I don't think there was one episode that I didn't at least tear up a little bit.
And then the whole, concept of the crowdfunding and how people would be supported if you do the story correctly. I could certainly see us being able to succeed in, bringing out the larger and more detailed story of all these things that so few people even know about, have ever heard, or even had a chance to read.
Well, exactly. And I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to do at Seed is tell. I mean, they're telling a very small story.
Right.
It's the story of the people that interacted with Jesus during his ministry. Okay. That's a very small story in the grand scheme of things. We want to tell the really big story.
Yes.
And frankly, compliment the Chosen. It wouldn't be anything.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
It's like if you watch what we're trying to do at Seed and then watch The Chosen, you'd be like, oh, wow. To see who Yeshua really was and what he really did.
Yes. Yeah, one last thing with regard to, because in the gospel there's only one story, where he was found in the temple teaching the rabbis and the men of wisdom. What people don't know, and what is covered in great detail in the infancy gospel, even as a child of 2 years of age, they were not able to find him a teacher because he was smarter than all of the teachers. And they were humbled by him, and they knew that he was masterful even at that young age. And so he never went to school. And that's why you found him instructing even the elders and the rabbis in the temple. All were amazed at him and his knowledge.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we are out of time, and so we'll have to continue this on your show next week. And for everybody else, you want to check out the Take on the World 2020 conference, where Zen is also speaking, and so am I. Go to Celebrate Truth, Robbie Davidson's YouTube channel, and that'll be streaming for the next couple of days. All right, man.
All right. Be blessed. Good night, all.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.